Hey guys, this is my 2017 KTM Enduro R, and I've had this bike for about 4 years, and it's the only bike I've had for that time because, well, it's an Enduro, so it's a bike I thought I could use for both on-road and off-road. And that's a really great thing about having a bike that works as a dirt bike and as a street bike. And in this video, I'm going to tell you everything that I love about it and everything that I hate about it. But let's talk about why I'm selling it, which I am. And that's because if you guys watch some of the videos, you know that recently at the office we have gotten a Triumph Scrambler, and I kind of have this thing where I really only want like one bike in my life. So unfortunately it's time for the old KTM to go. Now there's a new version of this bike that's out right now that's got some changes, but for the most part this bike has not changed a lot over the last 4 years. So let's talk about what defines the bike. And it's not the fact that it's a KTM, it's not the fact that it's an Enduro, it's not even the fact that it's got a lot of orange. Let me show you what defines it. It's this. Notice how I get on it. I have to put my foot on the peg. And then, if you look, I can almost kind of sit on this bike with both of my feet on the ground. Why don't you show them, Tommy? What defines this bike is the fact that it's almost 36 inches tall. It is a tall bike, and I am 6'2", and at 36 inches of seat height, I can barely ride this thing. And at first when I got this bike, I thought, you know what, I'm a tall dude, that won't bother me. But over the 4 years of having it, it has bothered me. It's almost just too tall, and a tall bike is a comfortable bike for somebody of my size and stature, but it's also a heavy bike. At 320 pounds wet, as a dirt bike, it's getting up there to where it probably exceeds my limits. Now, especially given the fact that this bike has a single cylinder, that produces about 70 horsepower. And that's a lot of power for what is essentially a dirt bike. Now, don't be fooled by the fact that this has got the word Enduro on it. This is just a very big, very tall, very powerful dirt bike. With almost 11 inches of ground clearance, there's not a lot that this will not go over. But perhaps it's a little bit too much bike for me. And what I mean by that is, you know, the more advanced of a rider you are, the easier big bikes are to handle off-road. But I would consider myself maybe an average rider off-road. And with a bike that weighs 320 pounds and is extremely tall, I can get myself into a lot of trouble on this bike. And while I haven't broken anything on this bike, I have come close to getting in situations that have terrified me. So I think I'm going to hopefully find myself something a little bit more manageable, something a little bit smaller, and then something that's purely dirt-based. You know, around the 250-pound range. Like I said, I've owned a lot of dirt bikes. That's about where I'm comfortable. And now that I have the Scrambler, I can get a dedicated off-road bike that won't be such a big old girl. Now, I've ridden this on-road, I've ridden it off-road, I've ridden it on dirt trails. I've pretty much done everything you can do with the dirt bike. And let's talk about the things I love. First of all, I love the look of the bike. I also love the fact that it's got a Rotex engine and it sounds really good. Let me start it up for you and you can listen to it. Oh yeah, I love the smell of a thumper. That brings back some good memories. And I haven't really changed out the pipe because, well, I don't need to change out the pipe. I don't want it to be too hot. I don't want it to be too kind of in your face. You know, I like the fact that it's a little bit more on the quiet side so that when you're going through a neighborhood, people aren't like, oh my God, what the heck is that? Is that a Harley? Some of the things I love about this bike is that it has a very progressive gearbox, a 6-speed gearbox, very easy to use, 1 down, 5 up. Kind of cool that it's still traditional and you have a real dial here. Plus it gives you your speed limit. You can kind of cycle through the different applications so that it gives you things like RPM. It just looks kind of modern yet old school. All right, now I've turned the bike off so you can hear what I'm saying, but basically I love oodles of suspension, both front and rear. Great Brembo brakes, basically what you want out of a tall, somewhat heavy dirt bike. Except for the fact, of course, that KTM has installed ABS, which is great on-road. It, you know, saves your butt in rainy situations, especially when you're on knobbies. But I think for liability reasons, and I'm guessing here, every time you turn the bike off and you turn it back on, you have to disengage the ABS. And if you're like me and you ride with buddies or you dirt ride, you spend a lot of time basically turning the bike off, checking the world out, taking a piss, saying hi to your friends, and then if you forget to turn off the ABS, then you get into very sticky situations. I was going down a very steep hill once, went to grab the brakes, and basically nothing happened. That's terrifying. And the way you turn it off is you have to hold down one of these little buttons, and you have to hold it down till the light blinks. It's unintuitive, and for something as important as not, dying off-road, it's a little too complicated. The other thing that I'm not in love with, let me show you right here, is the gas tank location. They put it back here to give you a little bit more equal weight distribution, which is grand, but the bike doesn't have a fuel gauge. It holds about 0.25 gallons, and if you forget to reset your odometer, then you just basically don't know when you're out of gas. You do get a little light that tells you you're low, but I like to know, especially when I'm touring, how much range I have, and I've gotten, over the 4 years I've owned it, into a lot of situations where I've basically run out of fuel, and then the light comes on, and then I'm like in the middle of the woods somewhere, and I don't know how many miles I have before I'm completely stuck. So a fuel gauge would be nice. Now, probably the biggest issue with this bike, and it happens to a lot of thumpers, keep in mind this is a water-cooled unit, is that it constantly runs hot. Now on a day like this, where it's in the 30s here in the mountains and there's snow around, it's fine. On the highway, it's fine. But if it gets into, let's say, the 70s or the 80s, and you're in places like Moab, this bike will run at its highest temperature. Now, I've done some Googling. You can add different coolant to it to keep it a little cooler. You can add a bigger fan, but it's unnerving when you're always looking at the gauge and you've got, I think, about 10 little notches and you're at number 9 or number 10 the whole time, and then you hear that fan screaming. Another thing that's not grand, and of course if you're a dirt biker you'll know this, KTM builds a seat that is rock hard even though it's long. KTM always wants you to stand up on the bike and not necessarily sit on it, but if you're using it as an enduro or a dual sport, you will spend a lot of time on the highway, and this is not the nicest of bikes. The other problem is this pipe gets super hot. I mean, even now, I've just ridden it probably for about a minute or two, it's already getting hot. God help you if you were to touch that with any part of your body that isn't covered with cloth. Now, when you're trying to do any kind of street driving on it, you're of course in that classic dirt bike position where you've got the wide handlebars, which is great. You've got a little bit of wind protection, but at about 65 miles an hour, it does get buzzy, and the wind is just hitting you dead in the shoulder. And basically, you know this, if you ride dirt bikes and you ride road bikes, the exact thing you want on-road is the exact opposite thing that you want off-road. And kind of the seating position on this and the seating stance on it is not conducive for long dirt bike rides, or especially long road bike rides. However, those are all small price to pay for what is an extremely capable, an extremely powerful, and perhaps most importantly, an extremely fun bike. If you're going to have a vehicle, in this case a bike that does both on-road and off-road, and if you're going to be like me and you weigh over 200 pounds, this is not a bad choice. KTM's, of course, they're more expensive to maintain, but this bike over the last 4 years has been rock solid. It's never failed to start. It's never gotten me stuck anywhere. The worst thing that's happened to me once, I was going up a gulch in Boulder, and I dropped the bike, and because, like I said, my ability probably doesn't match, well, certainly doesn't match this dirt bike's ability, I really had a hard time getting it back up and getting it up and out of a sticky, rocky, and wet situation. So for me, it was the best of both worlds, but now that hopefully I have more of a street scrambler, I can afford to go back and buy myself something that's a little bit smaller and a little bit more manageable. And the thing I really love about it is that when you're at, let me check my watch, 9,336 feet above sea level, is that it's fuel injected. Even back in 2017 when I bought this bike, there wasn't a lot of choice if you wanted a dual sport or enduro or dirt bike that was fuel injected. And I've been in a lot of sticky situations, not because of my ability, but because the bike does not run well, since it was jetted either for sea level or a mile above sea level, which is where I normally live. So when I take it up here, it just runs like crap, and fuel injection sorts all that out. So I would say if you're tall and you're big and you want kind of the jack of all trades, the KTM is certainly a good choice. They've updated since I've bought it. They've kind of changed the TFT around a little bit. It's got a little bit more horsepower. I believe this one was 67. The new one is about 75. They've upgraded the ABS, so that's a little bit nicer and a little bit more refined. But overall, this has been a really great bike. I'm gonna miss it, but as I get older, I want something that you know I can own and flog around instead of something that flogs me and owns me. And that's kind of how I feel on this bike, especially when I'm doing anything that's very tricky and very technical. So, as always, this is Roman reporting for the Fast Lane Bike. Thanks for watching, and yeah, it'll be sad to say goodbye to the KTM, but you know what? It's been a good bike, and sometimes the best part of owning something is when you buy it, when you sell it, and when you get to buy something else to replace it. And that's hopefully where I'm going to be at this summer. See you guys next time. Ciao.